all this means that the natural relations of Purusha to Prakriti in the material universe are the complete absorption of conscious being in the force of its workings through the complete self-oblivion and self-ignorance of the Purusha, the complete domination of Prakriti and subjection of the soul to nature. The soul does not know itself, it only knows, if anything, the workings of Prakriti. The emergence of the individual self-conscious soul in man does not of itself abrogate these primary relations of ignorance and subjection. For this soul is living on a material plane of existence, a poise of Prakriti in which matter is still the chief determinant of its relations to nature, and its consciousness, being limited by matter, cannot be an entirely self possessing consciousness. Even the universal soul, if limited by the material formula, could not be in entire possession of itself. Much less can the individual soul to which the rest of existence becomes by bodily, vital and mental limitation and separation something external to it, on which it is yet dependent for its life and its delight and its knowledge. These limitations of his power, knowledge, life, delight of existence are the whole cause of man's dissatisfaction with himself and the universe. And if the material universe were all and the material plane the only plane of his being, then man, the individual Purusha, could never arrive at perfection and self fulfillment, or indeed to any other life than that of the animals. There must be either worlds in which he is liberated from these incomplete and unsatisfactory relations of Purusha with Prakriti, or planes of his own being by ascending to which he can transcend them, or at the very least planes, worlds, and higher beings from which he can receive or be helped to knowledge, powers, joys, a growth of his being, otherwise impossible. All these things the ancient knowledge asserts exist. Other worlds, higher planes, the possibility of communication, of ascension, of growth by contact with, and influence from that which is above him in the present scale of his realized being.
Yeah, very nice big para. We'll go into detail. So basically, what he's saying here is that the, there is a gradation from the highest to the lowest. In the highest, there is light, there is knowledge, there is power, everything. And in the lower, because of the manifestation, we have discussed this many times, manifestation implies limitation and the opposite. It becomes the opposite of itself. There is an involution of knowledge becomes ignorance. Power becomes incapacity. The subtlest of substance becomes gross substance. And when the soul is living here, we have an idea normally that this soul is divine in essence, but it is in essence. Remember that, okay? The soul in man is divine in essence, but actually is not essence in, it is not really divine when it is inside you. And you are identified with your body, mind, life, it is forgotten that it is a divine. Okay? That one must realize. It is not divine to begin with. It's only essentially divine, like the seed. The seed is not free yet. It is like Prime Minister of a country has got tremendous power. But if you put him in a prison house, he can't do anything. And that's exactly what's happened. The divine soul at the highest level has put himself by his own choice into a prison house of body, mind, life. Okay? And this body, mind, life can be individual, but it can also be universal. Okay? So that's what he's saying. So the individual soul gets imprisoned in the matter, life and mind, but also the universal soul. The universal soul is the impersonal divine consciousness. In the human being, it becomes individualized. Okay. So keep this in mind. Now we start reading the para one by one. Each line. All this, if you remember, the planes of our existence. So Srila is saying that there are many, many planes. He follows the system of the 7 planes because he is following the Vedic division. 7 planes of consciousness. It need not be 7, it can be more and less, but he is following the 7. So all these 7 planes, the knowledge that is there, the laws that operate there are all different in each of these planes. Okay? So at the lowest level, the law is no freedom, imprisonment. Okay, so imperfection, therefore imperfection. So all this means that the natural relations of Purusha to Prakriti in the material universe are the complete absorption of conscious being in the force of its workings. Let's understand what he's saying very clearly. He has told you that each plane of consciousness is defined by the relation of Purusha and Prakriti. In matter, we can just say Purusha is 0.0001. But Shakti, the Prakriti, is 99.11111. Okay, sorry, 99.99991. Okay, that's a relationship. Then when you come to slightly higher, the proportions go on changing until finally you come to the self, where it becomes, consciousness becomes 99.9991 and the Prakriti, the power, becomes 0.0001. It is there, but it is not active. And when you go to the highest level, the supermental, you can say 50%, 50%. They are all equal to each other and they are fully cooperating with each other. The knowledge is given to Shakti and Shakti says, you can use me, and the Shakti says, yes, you can give me the knowledge, I will create the world. So this is what Swami is saying. So in the physical world, he is saying the Prakriti completely swallows up the Purusha. Matter completely swallows up the divine consciousness and imprisons it in itself. Okay, that's what he says. Prakriti in the material universe, the relation are complete absorption of conscious being. Conscious being, Purusha. In the force of its workings, Prakriti. So Prakriti has, if you want very graphic description, Prakriti has told Purusha, come under my feet and I'll press you down. Okay, you are there. Therefore, the complete self-oblivion and self-ignorance of the Purusha. The Purusha completely agrees to the Prakriti to remain her prisoner. This is the, in passing I mentioned, I think I mentioned once also before, the Sri Aurobindo on dramas, okay. Vasavadatta and Eric and even the Wazirs of Basora, all these, okay, are all symbolic of Purusha and Prakriti. In each one you will see that the girl first wants to completely dominate the male, but finally ends up by becoming the prince's slave. She falls in love with him. So this is the symbol of what Sri Aurobindo is. He's not just writing romantic dramas. It's a romantic drama, all of them. But they have got a deep meaning inside. Even Sri Aurobindo's jokes, okay, they have always got a deep meaning. All his jokes with Niruddha and all everywhere, there is a much behind the joke, there is a deep meaning. So this is very clear now. He is talking of the material universe. He is talking of the material universe where Purusha is completely dominated by Prakriti and has become her prisoner. Okay. The complete domination of Prakriti and subjection of the soul. The soul has become subject to nature. Nature means Prakriti, again, same thing. Okay, or Shakti. These are all equivalent words. Shakti, Prakriti, nature. Okay. Nature at the lower level is Prakriti in a mechanical energy. As it keeps going higher and higher, the nature of the Prakriti goes on changing and becomes more and more conscious. Now, in matter, the soul does not know itself. It only knows, if anything at all, look at that, if anything at all, the workings of Prakriti. In other words, the soul identifies itself, the consciousness identifies itself fully with the body-mind life. The workings of Prakriti are body-mind life. Okay. So, the emergence of the individual self-conscious soul in man does not of itself abrogate these primary relations of ignorance and subjection. Even if the man, the consciousness in man escapes and becomes the knower, okay, if he goes to the spiritual planes of consciousness, the relations of Prakriti and Purusha in the universe does not change. Individually it has changed, but it does not, it remains in that same condition universally also. In the universe also, divine consciousness has plunged itself into infinite matter. Okay? That's what he's saying. It's a very interesting sentence what he's saying. The soul does not know itself. And the soul is, it can be universal as well as individual. The individual soul, your soul, my soul. The universal soul, the divine consciousness spread out everywhere. Does not know itself. It only knows, if anything, the workings of Prakriti. Complete identification with body mind. The emergence of the individual self-conscious soul in man does not of itself abrogate these primary relations of ignorance and subjection. When the divine makes laws, he is not going to change his laws whimsically. He has made them permanent. Okay? That's what he's saying. If he went on changing his laws, then what sort of a creator is he? He doesn't know what he is creating. So when there is creation is there, they will always remain there. But there is an escape possible. The emergence of the individual self-conscious soul in man does not of itself abrogate the primary relations of ignorance and subjection. For this soul is living on a material plane of existence, a poise of Prakriti, in which matter is still the chief determinant of its relations to nature. In matter, matter is the king. And although life is there, and mind is there, and if you want, even the supermind is there, but all subject to the domination and the rule of Prakriti, of matter. Matter is the king here. Even the supermind is there, but the supermind also is not being allowed to very easily manifest itself. It will manifest slowly. It's a long game. And now it has been, it has absorbed the supermind, but supermind will finally have the last say. It will come out in due course. It is already there, but it will come out in due course. It's a question of evolution. And his conscious being, limited by matter, cannot be an entirely self-possessing consciousness. Again, he is using the word self-possessing consciousness. Consciousness is not master of itself. It is subject to somebody else. It is allowing others to dominate it. It is Purusha, the divine consciousness in the individual soul, is allowing body-mind life to rule over it, to subject it to its own conditions. Now he is talking of the universal soul, which is exactly the same. The universal soul is the impersonal divine consciousness everywhere. Even the universal soul, if limited by the material formula, could not be in entire possession of itself. So this is what is true for the individual is also true for the universe. Much less can the individual soul, to which the rest of existence becomes by bodily, vital and mental limitation and separation, something external to it on which it is yet dependent for its life and its knowledge. So let's read that last bit again. Much less at the universal level, it is much wider, but much less for the individual soul, because the individual soul is limited, to which the rest of existence becomes by bodily, vital and mental limitation and separation, something external to it. In other words, in matter, when the individual soul is subject to body-mind life, the universe becomes external to it. You don't know the universe at all. You don't know anybody that is there in the universe. If I am there and all my neighbors are there, even my family members are there, I know nothing about them. There is complete separation. The one has become the many. The principle of multiplicity applies in the physical world. And so you don't know. One does not know the other. Something external to it, on which it is yet dependent for its life and its delight and its knowledge. Now that's interesting. Although there is a relation, we have discussed this many times, the universe is interacting with the individual and the individual also is reacting with the universe. Okay? This is we go back to that idea of the Karmendriya and the Jnanendriya. Okay? Constantly there is an interaction between the universe and the individual. But yet you don't know them. You don't know that the universe is your benefactor. And you depend on it for your life, for your delight, and for its knowledge. That's interesting. You depend on the universe for your life, very easy. The universe is giving you food. And if you don't have food, your life will not exist. It's delight. Okay. Whatever enjoyment you are getting is because your senses are giving you delight from the physical world. And its knowledge also. Okay. You come to know slowly things about the universe. These limitations of his power, knowledge, life, delight of existence are the whole cause of man's dissatisfaction with himself and the universe. When there are limitations, okay, I can't, even the food I eat is limited. Even the enjoyment that I am getting from the physical world is limited. I can only try to satisfy my desires, but I can't do that all the time. The knowledge I have also is imperfect. Naturally, there is dissatisfaction. Not in the ordinary man, but in the man who is sensitive and has evolved. He becomes extremely dissatisfied with his own limitations. The normal man in the physical world is not at all dissatisfied. He accepts his limitations and tries to do his best. So, and if the material universe were all, I'm reading the next sentence, and if the material universe were all, and the material plane, the only plane of his being, then man, the individual Purusha, could never arrive at perfection and self-fulfillment, or indeed to any other life than that of the animals. The animal has absolutely no way of going to higher levels of consciousness. Remember, the chapter is the planes of consciousness, the planes of existence. In other words, material plane is not the only one. There are higher planes. So it's possible for man to escape into these other countries. It's like our the students who have passed their information technology exams or biology or whatever, they opportunities in India at one time were not sufficiently good, so they had to migrate to America. So when the man is sufficiently developed, he has to go for more development into the other planes of consciousness. He has to rise from matter to life, from life to mind, and from mind to the finally through spiritual planes of consciousness to superman. You can develop yourself fully in the place where opportunities are there. In the physical world, there are no opportunities, and that's the reason why the animals cannot do yoga. Okay? Only man can do it because he has evolved enough. He has passed, he has got his, maybe not PhD, but he has got his degree. Now he can become a PhD in the spiritual planes of consciousness. Okay? He can go up. So that's what he's saying. So there are other planes. Is that true? He's saying that all our ancient wisdom, the Upanishads, the Vedas, they all assert that yes, there are many other worlds which are far less dense and far less ignorant. There must be either worlds in which he is liberated from these incomplete and unsatisfactory relations of Purusha with Prakriti, or planes of his own being by ascending to which he can transcend them. So there are universal planes of consciousness, but these universal planes of consciousness are also reflected in the individual, also in his own way. Even in his own being, there is matter, life, mind, higher mind, element mind, all these things are there at the individual level also. That's what Siddha is saying. There must be either worlds in which he is liberated from these incomplete and unsatisfactory relations of Purusha and Prakriti, or planes of his own being. The material plane is there in his body. The universal prana is there in his vital. The universal mind plane is there in his mind, in his mental. By ascending to which he can transcend them, or at the very least, planes, worlds, and higher beings from which he can receive or be helped to knowledge, powers, joys, a growth of his being otherwise impossible. So, in other words, all these higher planes of consciousness which are there, they are all populated. There are beings there. Okay, this is absolutely, there is no such conception in the other religions, okay, that all these higher planes are all populated. The vital world is populated by gnomes, elves, and all sorts of small beings, okay, and they are typal, they don't evolve. They don't evolve. Then at the spiritual level also, there are so many. There are the Rudras, there are the Gandharvas, there are the Apsaras. All these beings are real and they are there and they interact also with the human beings. Then you go to the overmind level, gods are there. So nobody has described yet who are the denizens, the citizens, if you want, of the supermental world. There is not enough information about that. But surely there are also people who live in those worlds. I think Mother has mentioned once about it, that those who live there, okay, there can be an interaction with them also. If you are in the physical, in uh, the supermind plane of consciousness. So, and they can help you, but they also can uh, thwart your progress. That also they can do. Or at the very least, worlds and higher beings, note that. Okay? Just now what we said, Gandharvas, Kinnaras, okay, all, Kubera is the lord of wealth and he has got many attendants. All his attendants, there are any number. They are also called Ribhus. Okay? There is a Ribhu Gita. If you read that, you will see that there are all these planes of consciousness, all these people are there. Okay? Apsaras also are the female companions of the gods. So these are all real. They are not unreal at all. They are not mythological. They are all facts, subtle planes and subtle beings, or planes of his own being, by ascending to which he can transcend them, or at the very least, planes, worlds, and higher beings from which he can receive or be helped to knowledge, powers, joys, the growth of his being, otherwise impossible. So he has to go to the other planes of consciousness, he will be helped. All these things the ancient knowledge asserts exist. All these things the ancient knowledge asserts. The ancient knowledge is referring to the Vedas and the Upanishads and even the Gita. Okay. Other words, higher planes, possibility of communication, of ascension, of growth by contact with and influence from that which is above him in the present scale of his realized being. So, at whatever level he is, he can have access to beings which are above. In fact, planchet writing is one such. And in Europe, it is very common in the 19th century. Planchet. You get into touch with other beings in the physical world, in the higher worlds, and you communicate with them. But for that, you need a medium. And the medium is usually a human being whose mind is absolutely silent and he has a pen in his hand and he has got a paper, and whatever communication comes, he is writing it down. Usually there is a little bit of a distortion, and the communication that comes from the higher planes is not absolutely accurately recorded because the individual own consciousness distorts them. That's what Srindu says about the planchet writing. Okay? There you are. So, in other words, many planes of consciousness exist, and the material plane is not the only plane in which you are doomed to be imprisoned forever, like the animal. But even the animal has got the capacity of evolving upwards. So he can also become a human being, and a human being actively can become rise to other planes of consciousness. Liberation is possible for the human being. But that brings a very interesting question. I have just mentioned to you that Raman Maharsh, because Mother and Siddhartha have not spoken about this, that an animal can also be released forever without rebirth, because that's what Raman Maharshi did once. Okay, there was a little calf had come to them in the ashram. Someone had donated a calf for their milk. Okay, in Raman ashram, and that little calf grew into a big cow, and it was called Lakshmi. And Lakshmi was allowed to come into even the hall. Nobody would stop, because Raman Maharshi said if she wants to come in, let her come in. So she would go right into the hall. If you have been there, you know that there is a big hall and people are meditating and all sitting there, and this Lakshmi would go right up to him and he would allow her. And whenever he used to go out also, he used to first go and pet her. When she died, it is said that he sat with her and gave her liberation. Now this is very interesting because I did not know that that is possible. But he says afterwards that he learned a few lessons there. And what lessons he learned, he used for liberating his own mother. His own mother had also come there. And when she died, this time he corrected the wrong processes that he had employed for the cow, Lakshmi. This is aside, but this is also there. It's very interesting. So theoretically, if you have got the power of the spiritual planes of consciousness, you can give liberation to others. But in that case, the full development is not there. The individual is becoming universal and disappears from. So maybe that is not advisable for human beings. Why should you not enjoy all the other planes also? Okay. Okay. So we have got enough time now. We read the next paragraph. As there is a poise. So today only two of you are there. So Sunki will read.
Yes, I will read.
Yeah. As there is a poise.
As there is a poise of the relations of Purusha with Prakriti, in which matter is the first determinant, a world of material existence, so there is another just above it, in which matter is not supreme, but rather life force takes its place as the first determinant. In this world, forms do not determine the conditions of life, but it is life which determines the form, and therefore forms are there much more free, fluid, largely, and to our conceptions, strangely variable than in the material world. The life force is not inconscient material force, not even except in its lowest movements, an elemental subconscious energy, but a conscious force of being, which makes for formation, but much more essentially for enjoyment, possession, satisfaction of its own dynamic impulse. Desire and the satisfaction of impulse are, therefore, the first law of this world of sheer vital existence, the poise of relations between the soul and its nature, in which the life power plays with so much greater a freedom and capacity than in our physical living. It may be called the desire world, for that is its principal characteristic. Moreover, it is not fixed in one hardly variable formula as physical life seems to be, but it's capable of many variations of its poise, admits many subplanes, ranging from those which touch material existence and, as it were, melt into that, to those which touch at the height of the life power the planes of pure mental and psychic existence and melt into them. For in nature, in the infinite scale of being, there are no wide gulfs, no abrupt chasms to be overleaped, but a melting of one thing into another, a subtle continuity. Out of that, her power of distinctive experience creates the orderings, the definite ranges, the distinct gradations by which the soul variously knows and possesses its possibilities of a world existence. Again, enjoyment of one kind or another being the whole object of desire, that must be the trend of the desire world. But since whenever the soul is not free, and it cannot be free when subject to desire, there must be the negative as well as the positive of all its experience. This world contains not only the possibility of a large or intense or continuous enjoyments almost inconceivable to the limited physical mind, but also the possibility of equally enormous sufferings. It is here, therefore, that there are situated the lowest heaven and all the hells with the tradition and imagination of which the human mind have lured and terrified itself since the early stages. All human imaginations indeed correspond to some reality or real possibility, though they may in themselves be a quite inaccurate representation or couched in two physical images and therefore enough to express the truth of the superphysical realities.
Yeah. Okay. No? Now he is saying, he has described in the previous para the material plane. Now he is describing the life plane, and he is giving you all the characteristics, very, very detailed description of what the world is. So, in the material plane, matter is the determinant. In other words, in matter, in the lowest plane, matter is king. All the other life, mind, all these are, even the supermind is under the subjection of matter. Matter is the king there. Now when you come to the vital world, to the life plane of consciousness, life becomes the king. Now even matter becomes a subject. It's not the king anymore. Okay? It's a subject. And when you go to the mind level, mind becomes the king. And the others are also there, but subordinate to it. When you go to the spiritual planes of consciousness, the consciousness becomes the king. At each level, at its own native level, that is the king, and all the others who are there, but are also subject to the. In the supermind is the king, but all the others are subject to it. Okay? That's what he's describing here. And then he's giving also the characteristics of life. So let's have a look at it. We still have about 10 minutes. As there is a poise of the relations of Purusha and Prakriti, in which matter is the first determinant. It determines the everything. It's the one that lays down the laws, determinant. It's a king. A world of material existence. So there is another just above it, immediately above this subtler plane of consciousness, just like ice is matter if you want, and water is the life element just above it, and above it again is the water vapor, which is the mind. Okay? So it's like that, subtler and subtler. A world of material existence. So there is another just above it, in which matter is not supreme, but rather life force takes its place as a first determinant. Here, life becomes the king. Prana becomes the king. Even life, matter is now subject to it. Even supermind is subject to it. Remember that. In this world, forms do not determine the conditions of the life. When he's talking of forms, he means physical forms. In this world, where the vital world, forms, the physical forms, do not determine the conditions of life, because there is no fixed form. They are like clouds. Okay? All forms, your desires have forms, your vital, your thoughts have forms, but they are not physical fixed forms. They become subject to the laws of the vital world, and they become more fluid, like water, as I said. Okay? So, they, in this world, forms do not determine, matter does not determine the conditions of life, but it is life which determines the form. In other words, they are flexible. Or there is a flexibility. And therefore, forms are there much more free, fluid, largely, and to our conceptions, strangely variable than in the material world. If you think of the icebergs and the sea, then it becomes very clear. The iceberg is fixed, it is solid. But when you come to the higher level, it becomes the sea. Okay? The sea is now the main thing. Okay? The water. It's more subtle. This life force is not inconscient material force. It is not. It is slightly more conscious. Okay? Not even, except in its lowest movements, an elemental subconscious energy, but a conscious force of being which makes for formation. It has the power to make forms, but much more essentially for enjoyment, possession, satisfaction of its own dynamic impulse. So here, enjoyment, possession, satisfaction are the rules and laws of the vital world. In other words, what is the rule and the law in the physical world? Imprisonment. Imprisonment is the law in the physical world. But here, imprisonment is not. There is freedom. But it is limited. Enjoyment, possession. That's why in the human being who is very vital, he wants to possess everything. He wants to enjoy and possess and satisfy his own impulses. This is the If you think of man, then it becomes very obvious. But it is there also at the universal level. Universal enjoyment, universal possession, universal satisfaction. Desire and the satisfaction of impulse are therefore the first law of this world, of sheer vital existence. So, the law in the physical world, as I said, is imprisonment and no freedom at all. Now, and no consciousness either. But in life, consciousness is beginning to assert itself, enjoyment is beginning to assert itself, freedom also is beginning to assert itself, but in a very limited way. Okay. So, desire and the satisfaction of impulse are therefore the first law of this world of sheer vital existence. There is, in the vital world, prana is the king. That's what. This poise of relations between the soul and its nature, in which the life power plays with so much greater a freedom and capacity than in our physical living. It may be called the desire world, for that is its principal characteristic. Okay? Desire and possession, these are the characteristics of the vital world, and they are the rulers. Everything else has been subjected to desire. Moreover, it is not fixed in one hardly variable formula as physical life seems to be, but is capable of many variations of its poise, admits many subplanes ranging from those which touch material existence and, as it were, melt into that, to those which touch the height of the life power, the planes of pure mental and psychic existence, and melt into that. This is very interesting what he's saying. Life plane is not like a staircase. It's more like a ramp, as I said. So life is entering also the lower. It is entering into matter. And it's also entering into the mind above. Okay? That's what he's saying. Okay? Melt into that. It is melting into the mind and it's also melting into into matter. And in fact, if you see, all living creatures are a combination of matter and life. Okay? It's not only matter, but it's also a combination. If life goes out of that, there is death. It becomes only matter. That's what he said. For, wait one second, melt into that, and to those which touch the height of its life power, the planes of pure mental and psychic existence, and melt into them. By the way, he has used the word psychic here, not in the sense of psychic, be very clear, but in the sense of psychological, the usual English meaning of psychic. Okay? And psychic existence, because they are psychological planes. Life is psychological, mind is psychological, okay? And melt into that. For in nature, in the infinite scale of being, from the top to the bottom or from the bottom to the top, infinite scale of being, there are no wide gulfs, no abrupt chasms to be overleaped, but a melting of one thing into another, a subtle continuity. This is what we can express by saying it's not like a staircase, but like a ramp. Okay. Look at it carefully, you will see that. For in nature, in the infinite scale of being, there are no wide gulfs. There is no clear distinction between one level and another level like in a staircase. Even a staircase is connected, but he's saying they are not any gap between them. They are all continuous. One is running into the other. No abrupt chasms to be overleaped, but a melting of one thing into another, a subtle continuity. Out of that, her power of distinctive experience creates the orderings, the definite ranges, the distinct gradations by which the soul variously knows and possesses its possibilities of world existence. Again, enjoyment of one kind or another being the whole object of desire, that must be the trend of the desire world. But since wherever the soul is not free, and it cannot be free when the subject is desire, there must be the negative as well as the positive of all experience. Okay? When you have a desire, You are attached to your desire. And if you are attached to something, you are not free. You are conditioned by what you are attached to. There must be the negative as well as the positive of all experience. So that's how we are explaining suffering, okay, and pain. This world contains not only the possibility of large or intense or continuous enjoyments, almost inconceivable to the limited physical mind, but also the possibility of equally enormous suffering. Okay? And that explains what normally human beings think of as hell. Okay? Because if you are dissatisfied soul, after death, you will be lingering in this physical world without escape. Okay? But if you are a developed soul, you will go to the higher life world and shed your life body and go to the mental world and then shed your mental body and go into the psychic. But if you're satisfied, or even very often it happens with accidents. When there is an accident, okay, your soul will graduate to the life level and take birth again because those desires need to be satisfied. That's why reincarnation theory is very clear when there are proofs. They are usually accident cases. Okay? There are about recorded 2,000 accident cases in America, and in India we have got several very, very convincing proofs. It's very interesting if you actually type, okay, reincarnation in India, you will get about half a dozen cases, and they are so interesting. Okay, they only go to the vital world and take birth again. Even the memory is complete of the previous life. Okay, so anyway, that's another subject altogether. But I'm just mentioning that because that's what Sindhu is saying here. There is a possibility of suffering and also attachment. There is no total freedom. There is no freedom even in the mind. For total freedom, you have to go above the mind. So, but also the possibility of enormous sufferings. In fact, when you commit a suicide because you are dissatisfied with life on earth, you enter into the vital world, and there also you will be lingering for a long time. Okay? Lingering for a long time. Suicide cases are always all these are, and there is great suffering there. Okay? Dissatisfied, desires are not satisfied. You linger in the physical world, vital world, and if you are a suicide case, definitely you will linger there for a long time. But that also, it is here, therefore, that there are situated the lowest heavens and all the hells with the tradition and imagination of which the human mind has lured and terrified itself. Terrified itself, particularly Christianity. Okay? It is terrified itself. We will burn in hell forever. Okay? Since the earliest ages. All human imaginations indeed correspond to some reality or real possibility, though they may be in themselves be a quite inaccurate representation or couched in two physical images and therefore inapt to express the truth of supraphysical realities. The conceptions, okay, of burning in hell forever is a distortion. It's not exactly like that. There's no fire there to burn you, but it's a distortion of the truth. So we have crossed our time of 8:36, so we stop here. The next time he will slowly graduate next to the mental world, and he will tell you the characteristics of the mental world. Okay, so we stop here today. Okay, au revoir everybody.
Thank you.